All right, so for this example, we will investigate nested if statements, which are basically if statements within an if statement. It could be under the true block, it could be under the false block, and we're going to see in this example, I'm going to use a lot of if statements under the false block, okay? So let's say we have a grading application where we're going to ask the user to enter a numerical grade, right? So based on 100 points. So you can get 0 points all the way to 100. That would be the valid range. Within that valid range, you're going to obtain a letter grade based on where within that range were you. If you were between 100 and 90, I should have written really 90 and 100. Let me just change it here. So this should always start with the lowest, and here less or equal to 100. Then we're good to go for an A. Okay? Else, a B will be anything between 80 and less than 90. Okay? Since 90 is already included in the A range. Okay? Next, it will be either for a C, that includes a 70, but less than 80. So 79.9999 will still be a C. Well, it's up to the discretion of your teacher to turn that into a B. A lot of times they do. But anyway, so we know technically what the ranges are going to be. So from 0 to 60, less than 60, you get an F. However, what if you entered -3? What if you entered 101? We want to make sure that we also filter out any values that are not included in this range and display some sort of an error that says maybe that the grade is out of range, regardless if it's greater than 100 or less than 0. So we're going to take that into account, and we're going to work within the proper range to go ahead and subdivide it into its subranges to display the appropriate letter grade needed. So, for this program, we're going to need definitely some sort of a grade value that we will ask the user to enter. And maybe something like this, double grade. Okay? And then we'll ask the user, cout, enter a grade. And or a grade value, which means a number. And cn grade. Now, based on that, we should be able to determine if it's going to be a B, an A, a C, a D, or an F. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do here is show you how to test for the range, to make sure that you're, to start right from the beginning, that you are within a range. And then if you are, then we're going to stay within that true block of that if statement and evaluate the other subranges. And those we can go into the false block for those subranges, or these if statements that evaluate these subranges. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So first, I want to make sure I am within the true block or the appropriate range. If grade is greater or equal to 0 and grade is less or equal to 100, then we're within the proper range. So let me just do something like this, cout, grade within the proper range. So we'll start with this first, making sure everything works. Now let me put a /n here. You could do that instead of an endl, a lowercase n, by the way. Else, cout, and then you can enter the actual grade that you've entered is not a valid grade. right? So you could put a slash n here again if you want, or you could put an end L after you put the two arrows. So let's see how this works. So this here will filter out the grade. So we know within this true block, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of things. Okay. So first, let's go ahead, compile and run. And let's get this a little bigger. And let's go ahead and enter 101. 101 is not a valid grade. Okay, let's do it again. And let's enter minus 1.2. And again, that would not be a valid grade. Let's run it again. And this time I'm going to enter 45.7. Grade within the proper range. So that one is fine. Okay. Even if I entered 100, it will be within the proper range. So that would be at the upper limit. Okay. 100.1 will be an error. So let's do that. Oops. I hit the wrong key here. And let's say I do 100.1. So that's out of range. So we'll not even accept that. Okay, so now we know that this works. Let's try it for 0 again, always. Always check your values. And that's within the proper range. Okay, if you put something negative, it will not accept it. So everything between 0 and 100 will be acceptable. Now we could do a couple things here. To be safe, you could put your curly brace here and close the curly brace here for the true block. And do your next evaluation within the true block for all of your subranges. And now, depending on which value you have, so for you to be here where it's blinking, that means your grade actually was between 0 and 100. Notice the end, it's not an OR. That means both of these conditions have to be true to be right here or to execute any line I would write here. So the first thing I'm going to do is evaluate up to 90, from 90 and up. So if grade is greater or equal to 90, now the only time I'm here is I am between 0 and 100, so this could be true or false, so that's a good thing. Then you could go ahead and do a cout, the letter A, put a slash n, you're done. You've just displayed the letter A. Else. Now I'm going to write an if statement within that else on the false block. This is what we call an else if. So I'm breaking it down. I'm not going to write it as in your textbook where you see an else if as one word. I'm going to break it down so you can logically see what's going on. If grade is greater or equal to 80. So now as you can see, this sets the range for me. So cout, that would be a B slash n. Right? So if you had a 99, then only this if statement will be true. If you had an 89, this would be false. And this here will be true, right? So we keep going this way. Now we need another else. Now I don't need curly braces here. Actually, I could get rid of these two curly braces if I needed to, because all of these if statements are nested within one line. So they're all considered one line. So let's see what's going on with this if statement here. If grade is greater or equal to 70, what happens? Well, cout. You're going to get the letter C slash n, semicolon. Else, if grade is greater or equal to 60. Now you're going to say, well, wait a minute, what if it was 75? Well, if it was 75, it will be taken care of here, and this else will never execute. So this is only when you're filtering down, all the way down, that you will get something where you're down to 65, for example, then or 62. You're going to be at this location right here. So C out. You're going to get the letter D. /n gives you a new line. Else, there's no more testing here because you're either 0 to 60 or less than 60. C out. This would be the letter F. All right, well, let's see if it works. As a matter of fact, like I mentioned before, these here, for this example, are really optional. All of this is considered one line, by the way. Okay? But what we can learn from this is that we have a nested if statement within the true block of the first if statement, and then we have nested if statement within the false block of all subsequent if statements as we see them here. And this is a good example on how to handle a range. Now, there are variations to this program on how to handle a range, and I'll show you in a minute another version of this to make sure what we're going to do is an OR function, or we're going to use multiple serial if statements, if it's an OR, to do this. So with the AND expression within them. So you will see this in a minute. So first, let's get this to work. Let's see if it works. So compile and run. And let's say we get 78.9. Now we know this should give us a C. And sure enough, it gives us a C. Let's run it again. And let's put a -1. So we now know this will put -1 is not a valid grade. So it handles that. Perfect. Let's do another grade. Let's say you got a 34.12. Okay, well, that should be an F. And sure enough, it handles that. Let's do another one. And let's say this time you had an A, 95.45, right? And let's see if we get an A. And sure enough, you get an A. Now, let me show you another way to do a range or an evaluation of range, okay? With multiple Boolean expressions, a combinations of them. So what I'm going to do is copy all of this and change the inner code. So I'm going to copy this, create another version of this, right? And let's go ahead and create a new file, paste this here, and we're going to call this one 25. And what I'm going to do is remove this if statement and the else and start over with a new way of looking at the logic. Okay? So we could, if you don't want to do a nested if statements, then you can evaluate what we call an OR logic through serial if statements. This or this or this or this. Only one of them will be true anyway. However, within that OR logic, which I'm not going to write an operator for that, we're going to have if statements with a combined expression, Boolean expression with an AND to handle the range. Okay, so let's handle the wrong range. So if, let's say grade is less than 0, or I only need one of these to be true. Grade is greater than 100. I will see out here invalid grade. Right? So we know this will be an invalid grade. Now you can put a /n here if you want. Let's do another if statement. If grade. So now this is what I mean by an OR, is that you have this and then you have another one, right? But only one of them will be true. right? So now I know I'm within, let's say, the range, but what range? Grade is greater or equal to 90, and grade is less or equal to 100. So this is what we call a combinational logic here, or expression. And what do we have? We have Cout. You get the letter A. Notice I'm going to leave a space here. These if statements are not attached to each other. They're not nested if statements. This is what I mean by an OR logic. Okay? As you go down, you're ORing each one separately. So if grade, and you can see it's tedious versus the previous version. Greater or equal to 80, and grade is less or equal to or less than 90 in our case. Okay, so we have to be careful. 90 should not be included in this range since it already belongs to the A range, right? So Cout. This will be the letter grade B. Next, if grade is greater or equal to 70, and grade is less than 80, then Cout. This would be the letter C. Right? So let's look at another one. If grade is greater or equal to 60, now you're getting it, and grade is less than 70, so you should not include 70, right? It excludes it. Then Cout. The letter is D/N. And then if grade is greater or equal to 0, which is a valid value, and at the same time is less than 60, grade here, then Cout. This would be an F. And as you can see, this is the long way, much more involved way to code this. So we have one that handles the error. We start with that. And then the rest handles, if you're within a certain range, what happens. The problem with this, every if statement in this program will be evaluated, which means in terms of processing time, this will be a lot slower than the previous version. I'll explain that in a minute. So let me first save this and compile it. So this will be example 25. Okay, and let's compile it and run. And let me make this a little bigger here. It should behave exactly on the outside, similar to the previous version, right? So let's say I put a -9, then that would be an invalid grade. Now let's suppose something I put in above, like 101.3, and again, that would be an invalid grade. Let's say we put something within the general range of valid grades, and let's put a 67.45. Let's see if it picks up a D. And sure enough, it filters out everything else and picks up a D. But here's the problem with this. Let's say you entered a grade, right? So now you have the grade here, and you're evaluating the first if statement. So that means you have to go through this evaluation. If it's false, you do nothing. Notice there's no else. But you still had to evaluate. Was the grade within this range and this range? That takes processing time. And guess what happens right after that? You are forced to again evaluate, even if the grade was invalid. Let's say you entered -3. Well, it doesn't matter. You will still go through all of these if statements here, right? And every if statement you're going to go through is going to take a few milli or nanoseconds of your running time for the program. Okay? So if your program is time sensitive, this is not a good idea. Let's look at the previous example. And here, let's say you entered from the beginning -3. Obviously, we always have to evaluate the first if statement. And this happens to be false. So what happens? It goes straight down to here, execute this line, and you're out. Which means it didn't even bother evaluating any of this since the if statement was false, the first one. Because you put a -3, it's not within that range. Notice that whole block of code didn't even get evaluated. Your computer didn't waste time checking each one of these if statements. All right, well, let's look at another scenario. Let's say you entered 70, right? Or 72, right? Right, so you know the first if statement has to be evaluated. The second one will be evaluated right after that since you're within the proper range. So 72 is within 0 and 100. So is it greater than 90? So you will be evaluating. The answer is no. Is it greater or equal to 80? The answer is no. Is it greater or equal to 70? Yes. And it will print the C, but it will skip all of this since you said, yes, you had 72, you're done. That's your point of exit from this whole if statement chain. So these lines of code will not be executed at all. They won't be even evaluated. So this form of nested if statements offers you more efficiency in terms of execution time. Versus this, you're going to have to evaluate every if statement. That means this statement, or this one, or this one. This is what I meant by an or, by the way. And this one, and this one, and this one. Okay? So I hope you got it. And we're going to do one more example in the next video where we will evaluate, again, multiple if statements, but we're going to use something else called the switch statement. And that's valid when you're dealing with integer, you're comparing integers or characters. Okay? So there are particular cases where that might come in handy, where we're going to use the switch and the case syntax.